As well. You rightly put it, Leanne, an election year this year, 20 years of democracy is what we're celebrating. So many people are just giving their 2 cents worth, I suppose, of what we can expect in today's budget speech. We'll hear from Minister Pravin Gordhan later today as he delivers the last budget speech for the 4th of Parliament. He's looked into the coffers and will be dividing the spoils a little bit later. But let's find out now from an educated guesser's perspective, I suppose, what we can expect today. I'm joined by David Moore. He's the Chief Investment Strategist for Old Mutual Wealth. A very good morning to you. Thanks again for joining us.
Good morning.
I spoke about the fact that this is an election year, 20 years of democracy, etc. What are you expecting to hear from the Minister today?
I think the Minister, is in an election year, and one would probably expect him to be as generous as he could be under circumstances. However, his problem is the circumstances are very tough. The economy is only growing at about 2%. International investor sentiment towards countries like South Africa, emerging markets, is very unsettled. So he's faced with a twin problem that he's got slow growth in his tax revenue and he needs to close the budget deficit. And I think those are the battles he would be fighting. Within that, he would probably like to give something to the voters for this year, but there won't be anything major. There might be some small concessions in terms of income tax to take care of the inflationary impact on the income tax that middle and lower income earners would be paying. But probably the biggest present he can give voters this time round is not to have any nasty surprises, any major tax hikes in the budget.
So you expect the Minister to come bearing gifts. That's your expectation. But if you were the Minister's personal advisor, what would you have liked to hear him say today?
I think I would have loved him to look at measures to try and broaden the tax base. We've got a very narrow tax base in South Africa, and the pressures on that narrow tax base are building up every year. So I think that's the first thing one wants to see progress in terms of that. Secondly, looking at the spending of government, more emphasis on capital spending with the infrastructure program rollout that we desperately need in South Africa. And then lastly, one would probably want to hear more detail in terms of fiscal rules. Are we going to aim for a 3% budget deficit over time? What are we going to do with the spending ceiling that is imposed? What does that imply in terms of fiscal discipline in future?
Now, it's not just South Africans that are looking forward to hear what the Minister has in store for us. It's also international rating agencies, investors as well. You're in the finance sector and you have been for quite a number of years now. How important is this particular speech when it comes to how we look further afield?
I think it's very important, as I said earlier, against the background of international investment sentiment that's very unsettled towards emerging markets, that first and foremost the Minister must try and illustrate that we are maintaining fiscal discipline and that South Africa is on a sustainable fiscal path in the future, meaning that we won't build up debts that we cannot service in future. And I think that should help to settle down financial market attitude towards South Africa and hopefully help to take some of the pressure off the currency and also put us in a position that we don't need to hike interest rates unnecessarily as we've seen and as we've been forced to by international financial markets.
Now, you've mentioned the D word, debt. Let's take our focus away from the national budget for a second and just take a look at personal households and individual households when it comes to the culture of saving in South Africa. I think there is a correlation somewhat between the national government and perhaps household issues. Talk us through savings as a culture in South Africa, especially amongst the debt-ridden South Africans.
Yes. Unfortunately, South Africa over the decades have always been poor savers. I'm talking about households. And that hasn't changed. If you look at the huge boom we've had in unsecured lending, I think that has even worsened the situation over the last little while. But I think against that background, it's very important for government to set an example in terms of their savings. So if you look at government as an entity, it's also either a net saver or a dis saver. When we were running budget surpluses, we were big net savers and government was contributing to the country's savings. And we would like to see in this budget where we are now a dis saver on government side and on the household side, that at least the government sets an example and becomes a net saver again. And hopefully then households will slowly start changing their long culture of being dis savers.
We'll have to leave it there for now. My thanks again to you, David Moore, the Chief Investment Strategist there, Old Mutual Wealth. We're going to take a quick ad break. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Stay with us.